Hello and welcome to my favorite topic. I hope you're ready for the next 3 to 5 business days of me talking about the Olympics.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to an extra special episode of 80% Mental. I'm Dr. Pete Olushoga, and this is a podcast all about the psychology of sport and performance. At the time of recording, the podcast has just passed 40,000 downloads. So I just wanted to thank you. I was going to download an applause sound effect, but I don't need to now. So yeah, I just wanted to give a shout out really to everyone who's listened, liked, shared, or otherwise supported the podcast. And that includes the incredible lineup of guests that I've just had the good fortune to be able to speak to. Anyway, I thought that I was finished with series 2, but then I got a text message that read something along the lines of, if you want to talk about the Olympics again, I'm totally down for that. And I should have known really, but I thought, yeah, okay, let's do it. So this is the super special bonus episode Winter Olympics review. And if you couldn't guess, my first guest and the author of said text message is the one and only Dr. Leah Washington. Leah, welcome back again to 80% Mental.
Thrilled, as always, to talk about my favorite topic.
Of course. And if you've listened before, you'll know that Leah is a professor of sports medicine and sports psychology and just seems to have fallen into her role as 80% Mental's resident Olympic expert. I'm thinking about giving you your own bio on the website, to be honest.
Amazing. I'm here for it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm actually looking for a new co-host. So, play your cards right.
Into it. I'm into it.
But you'll have some competition for that role because it's also my pleasure to welcome back. He's looking very confused at the moment. Again, to 80% Mental, Dr. Chelsea Day, sports psychologist at the Ohio State University. Chelsea, welcome back to 80% Mental.
It was generous of you to say that there would be some competition. I'm here for the listening and add-ins, but there is a very clear winner on the resident Olympic expert, and it's not me.
So we're recording this about a week or so after the end of the 2022 Winter Olympics, and there's so much to talk about. But I like this from our last Olympic show that we did, and I like testing Leah's Olympic knowledge as well. So we're going to start.
I have to caveat, I'm not as strong at the Winter Olympics as I am at the Summer Olympics,
Oh, you can't
but
say
I'll
that now.
give it a go. I'll give it a go.
No, you can't say that now. You're the Olympic expert. That you sold yourself as that.
No, I'm fucked.
All of them.
Don't have caveats now. Okay, so Olympic facts. The very first Winter Olympic Games were held in...
Ooh, the first ones were held in... Hold on. Paris?
Close. It was in France. They held in Chamonix in France in 1924. This is actually... So this is an incredible Olympic fact. I mean, I've sold it as incredible, but in 1964, which was in...
1964 was... See, this is where I'm going to get all fucked up. 64, I'm trying to remember which one was which. Innsbruck.
Yeah, it was. Oh, okay, Olympic expert. Anyway, in 1964, the army had to deliver 50,000 cubic yards. And cubic yards is an odd measurement, by the way. Just want to throw that in there. Nobody measures anything in cubic yards.
If you buy mulch. If you buy mulch in the U.S., cubic yards. I got you. I worked at a farm store once. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Every day's a school day. The army had to deliver 50,000 cubic yards of snow because it just hadn't snowed enough in the lead up to the games in Innsbruck.
Oh,
no. Yeah. Do you want some more Olympic facts?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Of course you do. Deborah Thomas became the first Black athlete to medal at the Winter Olympics after she won bronze in the figure skating in 1998. 1998, of course, being
98 was Nagano.
No, it wasn't.
No?
No,
1998?
I don't think so.
1998 was Nagano. I think you're thinking of 1988, which was Calgary.
Did I say 1998?
You did.
God damn it. All right, 1988 then, which was in Calgary. All right.
You want to know what's wild is that Canada has had 2 Winter Olympics, the United States has had 4. And I feel like that is backwards.
Well, they should do something about that. So, do you know who the first black athlete to win gold at the Olympics was?
In any sport?
In any sport. The Winter Olympics, though, we're talking about. I'd ask Chelsea if you have any idea, but I mean...
Yeah, I thought about Googling it and then just like pretending I knew it. I respect the integrity of this show.
I don't know.
Okay. Do you want to know?
Yes.
It's Vonetta Flowers. And she won gold in the 2002...
Speed skating?
No, 2-woman bobsleigh.
Oh, bobsled.
Yeah. 2002, which of course everybody knows was in...
2002 was in Salt Lake City.
It was, yes. Okay, a couple more Olympic facts for you. Skeleton track in Beijing had the first ever 180-degree corner of any Olympic Winter Games. So, I mean...
That track was bonkers.
Yeah. It's fascinating. And okay, so this is a good one. Chelsea, you might be able to jump in on this one as well. So today, 12 countries have participated in every Winter Olympic Games. It's 12 countries, okay? I'm going to give you half of them, because half of them are pretty obvious. So the United States...
But those are the ones I should be able to get.
Oh.
The United States. Wait, I got one.
Okay, I'll give you that one. Any more?
Canada?
Canada, yeah.
Norway, Sweden.
Norway, Sweden, yeah.
I was gonna say Sweden. They felt like they would be there.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
England, France.
France, yeah. Did you say England?
Yeah.
Great Britain, yeah, I'll give you that.
Great Britain.
Yeah. There's a few more.
Finland.
Finland, yeah.
Germany.
No,
No.
surprisingly.
Okay. Italy.
Yeah,
Switzerland.
yeah,
Austria.
yeah. How are you doing this?
What?
You got one more.
Um,
I'd be surprised, to be honest, if you got this one.
Belgium.
No, it's Hungary.
Oh.
Yeah. So the United
Interesting.
States, Great Britain, Canada, Sweden, Norway, and Finland. Austria, France, Hungary, Italy, Poland, and Switzerland. The only country that's won at least one gold medal in every Winter Olympics is...
Norway.
No.
Fuck. I'm sucking with this.
Canada?
No.
Not us.
We're number one. We're number one.
Oh, really? Us?
Yeah, USA, yeah.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. And
Obviously.
okay, last one, because I think this is probably getting slightly boring now for the people listening. Out of 92 Olympians returning to Team USA, 4 athletes will be competing, or sorry, 4 athletes just did compete in their 5th Winter Olympics. Can you name all 4 of them?
Shaun White.
Mm-hmm.
Mike Schuster. Curling.
Almost. Yeah. John Schuster?
John Schuster, sorry.
Yeah.
John Schuster. Hillary Knight was in her 4th. Kendall Coyne?
No.
Oh, that's also 4.
Wasn't there a snowboarder?
Mm-hmm.
Shaun White?
Wasn't there a female snowboarder?
There was.
Oh, females. Oh,
I'm not going to get a name, but...
Lindsay Jacob Ellis?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
And was it her partner? Nick Baumgartner?
No. Female skeleton.
Oh, I can't think of her name.
Katie Erlander.
Erlander.
Well, that's quite impressive, though. 5 consecutive
That's so
games.
many Olympics.
It's so many Olympics.
I mean, that's ridiculous. 2006, 10, 14, 18, and then obviously this year, 22.
So the German speed skater in her 8th Olympics. Yeah.
Yeah.
How does that math even work?
Wild.
Okay, let's move it on from Olympic facts.
All right, I feel like I let you guys down on that one.
Well, I mean, it's an area for improvement. You just need to think of it that way.
I got to work on that.
Come back stronger. I'm pretty sure we'll be doing this again. Okay, so let's talk about our just favorite moments from the games. Like, what were the things that stood out to you? Chelsea, I'm going to come to you first. What stood out? What was your favorite moments of the games this time?
I mean, even though I couldn't get all the names, I thought it was really cool. I think the older I get, the cooler it is to see people like my age actually like doing elite athletic things, as I feel like I'm on the back end of any fast movement. And so that just was really cool. It just made it a lot more relatable. I feel like a lot of times, especially in a lot of these winter sports, I often feel like I'm just like old and not cool because they're really like cool sports. Like they're really cool sports, and they're not sports that even exist for the most part where I live and where I grew up. And so, I mean, that was probably like big picture. One of the coolest things for me is to see people like me out there doing really, really cool things. So that was kind of the big picture thing. I really liked, and I mean, I know that I'm supposed to pick probably like more performance-y things, but I really liked a lot of the coverage. And I mean, I was wrangling a toddler this year who has taken over all of our television programming because I guess that's what happens when the toddler rules the house. But I thought the coverage was really cool, and all of the different angles, instead of just seeing a lot of the coverage on major news stations, a lot of just the coverage of getting to see clips of really cool pieces of performance that maybe I would have missed even if I were watching the coverage throughout social media, highlighting people who maybe wouldn't get primetime coverage or I wouldn't see their performance because we only show Americans mostly over here. And so that was just really neat to be able to hop on social media and see, names that I would never see, performances that I would never see, and feel like I get to engage with those in a new way. So I think for me, that was just a really different experience of this Olympic cycle, is getting to see and access more coverage than I ever have, given, my move from seeing it on social media versus traditional television coverage.
Yeah. I think the BBC's coverage over here was pretty good actually, and just being able to kind of dip in and out and see different things and see what I wanted to see rather than kind of just the sort of highlights packages. Leah, what about you? What were some of your favorite moments?
Yeah, I think one of my top favorite moments was watching Nathan Chen in men's figure skating. He had such a disappointing Pyeongchang, and to come back and he just looked incredible. And it was really the first time that when I watched his free skate every single day for a week. I was so excited for it. But it was the first time I think he'd really not just skated and competed, but really performed. And he smiled in his performance, and he just had such joy in skating. And he just looked like I think it was his quadlets, and I started crying. I was like, I love you. You're so great. And like, I'm on the phone with my mom. I was like, she's like, are you okay? I'm like, no. And like, just to be able to see him put all the pieces together and to have his Olympic moment that he was supposed to have 4 years ago and didn't. And it was just to watch him have such a love for his sport, and his performance was just amazing. Other highlights for me were in men's hockey, watching Slovakia win their first medal. They got a bronze, and they were so fucking pumped for it. And they were just like out of their minds. Finland won gold for the first time ever, which is crazy. And then when you look at like on the women's side of hockey, the gold medal match between the United States and Canada had over 3.5 million views in America alone, which the only thing I think in the last it's that beat that number was like the Game 5 Stanley Cup final. And considering on the East Coast that game started at 11 o'clock at night is incredible. Like those are incredible numbers. And just like some countries that haven't been in the Winter Olympics before, like Australia had their first curling team, and you saw the return of Jamaican bobsled, and just like a lot of countries who hadn't had athletes in the Winter Olympics before, was really exciting to see.
It's interesting you mentioned Nathan Chen there, and you talked about that joy, just the joy of competing, and that's something that I really noticed with this Winter Olympics in particular. And I don't know whether it's something to do with the fact that it's kind of not post-COVID, but kind of post a lot of the COVID restrictions. But there was just, a lot of kind of athletes who were just really, really happy to be there and competing. And there was a lot of, particularly in the snowboarding and the skiing. And I don't know whether it's to do with just those events or the nature of those events, but particularly in the women's events, just athletes just celebrating each other. Yeah, they were just celebrating each other's success, and it was really lovely to see that. I think that was kind of one of the things that really stood out for me, anyway.
Yeah, when Nick Baumgartner and Lindsay Jacobellis were in their snowcross or the mixed snowcross race, and I'm obviously like 2 feet from my television, like screaming. But to watch Nick cheer for Lindsay, like as she was snowboarding, was just like, and you could see like the other athletes were like looking at him, and he's like losing his mind, and I'm losing my mind, and I'm like, yes, we're in this together. And she's just crushing it, and she has such a strategic, like technical race, and it just like, but to see him be so excited for her was like, yeah, like I think you're right. Like there's so many, especially I think in snowboard, that there's such a community and they're so supportive of each other. When Shaun White came off of his half pipe for his final run, and all of the athletes were there waiting for him, like, and he starts crying, and I was like, I'm crying, like it's a mess. But it was so great to see it's so awesome to see these athletes support each other, and it's like, this is what the Olympics are for.
Absolutely. My other favorite moment, I don't know if anybody saw this, was John Salinen, the Finnish, I think it was snowboarding. Was it snowboarding or was it skiing? In the half pipe, who crashed into a cameraman. Which was actually, that's quite an impressive feat to be able to do that. Of all the space that you've got to land on a cameraman's head is actually quite impressive. But that was a moment for me. But I enjoyed watching the big air as well, and Su Yuming on the snowboarding big air. I just kind of watching it open-mouthed, jaw on the floor, like, how are they doing this?
I'm pretty sure, I was like, are they going to land on the moon? Like, what is... I can't even imagine.
But it was like every single time, every single jump, just as they're about to land, I'm thinking, they're not going to land that. There's no way they're going to land that. Oh, they've just landed it.
Oh, it's fine.
Yeah.
Like with these, and they just like keep going. I think I would turn into just like dust, but it's amazing. They just land as if they landed on a pillow, and there they go. And it's really unbelievable. But
in terms of moments of the games, we can't really not talk about Kamila Valieva. Just to give a bit of background, Russia is already barred from international sports competition until I think the end of this year, end of 2022. So Russian athletes are competing under the banner of the Russian Olympic Committee, which is entirely different and not Russia at all. The Russian Olympic Committee is definitely not just Russia. It's completely different. Anyway, but 15-year-old Kamila Valieva, 15 years old, she helped the Russian Olympic Committee, not Russia, to win a gold medal in team figure skating. And then everything kind of just unraveled from that point on. So she tested positive for a banned substance before the games, but the test was only reported during the games, literally about an hour before the medal ceremony where she was about to get the team gold. So she was suspended by the Russian anti-doping agency, then unsuspended the day after, and then all sorts of shit kicked off. So WADA, the doping associate, what's it?
World Anti-Doping Agency.
Anti was the word I couldn't remember. So WADA, the World Anti-Doping Agency, and the International Skating Federation and the International Testing Agency, acting on behalf of the IOC, all appealed to the Court of Arbitration for Sport to have the suspension reinstated. But they cited special protection for minors, because she was only 15, and the fact that there was a delay in the test reporting. And they said that there was a risk of causing her irreparable harm by preventing her from competing. So she was allowed to compete in the individual figure skating, but the decision was made that until the whole situation was resolved, there would be no medal ceremony for either the team event or for the individual event if she finished in the top three. It's getting really complicated, right? So in the individual event, she ended up first after the short program, but then just came undone like you wouldn't believe in the free program. So she fell several times, was visibly upset during the performance, and it was genuinely quite difficult to watch. There's a lot to process there. 15-year-old, suspended and unsuspended, shadow of a drug scandal, knowing that even if she won, there wouldn't be any ceremony for her or for anybody else. So, my question at the end of all that is like, what the hell are we supposed to make of all of that?
I mean, do you want to start with the individual? Do you want to start with the system? I mean, there's like so many, there's so much. There's so much to unpack with this whole thing. The ladies free skate was maybe the saddest I've ever been watching the Olympics. Truly devastating to watch her fall apart, and to then, as you know, the other skaters are finishing, and you've got Alexandra Trusova, who ended up finishing second, throwing a full-blown temper tantrum, like because she thought she should have won, and screaming, "I'm never going to skate again. I hate the sport," and like being chased around by her coach. But like if she could have flung herself on the floor, I think she would have. And then you have Anna Sherbakova, who won, who was obviously the favorite, actually, because she's the reigning world champion. And she's literally sitting all by herself, having just won the Olympics. Like, I don't know what to do with my hands. Like, nobody was around there to congratulate her. Like, Kerry Sakamoto, who finished in third, like gave her a hug. And she's just like, I guess I won the Olympics. Like, it was just like, I felt bad for every single person involved in this. And like to have, looming over them of like, we're not even going to have a ceremony. Like if, Valieva is in the top three, is like, so now you're going to rob everybody else of that experience. And what is insane to me is like, when you look at like the decision of like, yes, no, she can't skate. Yes, she can skate. Like, not only did you take like the weakest possible position, but you actively made the situation worse, because now you've said it's totally fine to dope a 15-year-old because it's not up to her. Because the problem ultimately is that they know how to punish an athlete. They don't know how to punish the system. And the system is really what's the problem here.
I feel like every adult in this situation failed everybody. That I think that's what, I mean, I work with 18 to 22 year olds, and they are technically adults and also debatable. And, I think about, a 15-year-old that, we talk about with any kind of doping, right? You're responsible for what you put in your body, but then also like a 15-year-old and having to be the face of a bunch of poorly acting adults, right? Like she's the face of that. And so she bears the wrath at the same time. Whether or not you have compassion for her, she still bears the wrath of it, which is completely unfair to a developing young adult, child, emerging adult. And for me, that was the tragedy. Like the sport thing, sport matters, all of this matters, and it is important, and I'll never downplay it. But like we are talking about the life and well-being of a kid. And to put her in that position of, if you do well, then these other people get punished because of you. And if you don't do well, you're going to be an embarrassment and you're an example of why we shouldn't do this. And so like the weight of the world was put on the back of a 15-year-old who, and I don't want to say nothing was her fault because I don't know any circumstances or details. However, every adult in her universe failed her over and over and over to get her into a position that she got into. And then every adult in the Olympic stage failed her. And I think it was just like, if you could take all of the bad options, like Leah said, if you could take all of the bad options and do them at once, like that's what happened. Like, what are all the worst things we could do? Let's do one and then take that one back and try a different worst option. And so I think that's the tragedy is, I don't know how this doesn't affect her for the rest of her life. That these things affect someone's trajectory and emotional development and growth for the rest of their lives.
I mean, when you look at the Etieri Tutberidze, her coach, like, it's this open secret in figure skating that this woman is a monster and that she's essentially like the wood chipper of coaches. Like they're all one and dones. Everybody talks about the Etieri expiration date, that all of her athletes, they retire because they're injured. They retire because they have an eating disorder. Nobody makes it past the age of 18. And it's so highly unusual, and yet all of them are world champions once. All of them are Olympic champions once. I was reading an article about Evgenia Medvedeva, who came out of her club in Moscow, and so left Tutberidze, went to train with Brian Orser in Canada, and was literally like, I had no idea coaching could be like this. It was like a world-changing viewpoint. He connected her with a dietitian so that she could deal with her nutrition issues. She was like, my body is now athletic. It is strong. I don't feel tired anymore. I don't like. Ladies figure skating in Russia is so prestigious, and it's so ripe for abuse because these girls are so vulnerable. And then you look on top of everything that in 2020, the ISU voted Etieri Tutberidze the coach of the year. Like, what are we doing here?
Message sent.
Got it. Totally got it. Winning is everything. I do not give a shit about these girls' lives.
Mm-hmm.
They can disappear and nobody will talk about them or think about them ever again. And you look at, women in the United States who are competing, 20, 22, 25, like they're able to have lengthier, careers. Yeah. And what frustrates me the most is that all these conversations end up being like, well, maybe figure skating is bad. And it's not the sport, right? Like it is possible to have healthy athletes compete and have long careers if they're managed appropriately.
So one of our colleagues, and I don't know if either of you saw this, but one of our colleagues, Mona Arvinen Barrow, wrote a fairly impassioned Facebook post about this. She said, yesterday was a sad day for figure skating. The words I would use to characterize the three Russian skaters are hopelessness, loneliness, sadness, and grief. She talked about some of the things that you just talked about there, Leah. Trusova having a tantrum for not winning because she felt she deserved to win after landing 5 quads. Sherbakova sitting by herself after winning, just kind of not really knowing what to do with herself. And Valieva coming off the ice after just what was a devastating collapse in performance. Like I said, it was hard to watch, with the coaches saying, why did you give up? Explain it to me. He's a 15-year-old kid. So, Mona went on to say, Valieva should never have been allowed to skate, period. Doping or not, none of this should have happened. Children should not be allowed to compete in women's events. And I wonder what you think of that. Given what you just said about figure skating's not bad, it's the system that's bad. Like, I wonder what you think about that. Children should not be allowed to compete in women's events, because I don't know. I don't know what I think about that, because then you wouldn't have some of the like amazing stories that we do have. You wouldn't have, was it Chloe Kim? Tom Daley was kind of 14 when he first went to the Olympics, So I don't know. I don't know if you have any thoughts on
Tara Lipinski won the gold medal when she
right.
was 15.
So yeah, thoughts.
I don't think age is, I think we're hung up on the wrong thing. I don't think that age is the thing that defines whether this is healthy or competitive for this age group. I think it's the health of the sport. I think that if a 15-year-old can go to the Olympics in a healthy, well-managed way, then I don't think it should matter. But as it stands, that argument has some feet or teeth, whatever the saying is, has some teeth to me that,
I don't think it's feet.
I don't know, whatever it is. Oh God. I'm really good at sayings. I'll just try to think of some more, as we go. But I think that, that argument holds if things continue how they are. I don't think as it stands, much of elite sport in terms of Olympic sports at the Olympic level is safe for 15-year-olds. Mm-hmm. I think that if we can hold coaches accountable, if we can hold governing bodies accountable, and we can develop young people in a healthy way, which can be done. I've seen it. I have been a part of it. I think it can be done. It's just not done on a widespread level, or maybe not as visibly, because we still have so many old school coaches and old school people in charge. We're seeing the tides turning, but it's not there yet. So I don't know that age is the issue. I think the health of the sport is an issue. And currently, I would agree it's not safe for a 15-year-old, but I think it can be.
I think where a lot of the difficulty really comes through is that, like, you can have these elite athletes where their sport development is separate and apart from their cognitive development, right? That you have to remember that you're still dealing with children. And I think a lot about, like Chelsea said, like, I have been a part of, when you can have a youth athlete and they can be really successful and they can have fun and they can have both of those things at the same time. But I also, see things like major juniors hockey where, these young guys are put in this professionalized system at a very young age. And there are any number of abuse scandals in that system. And we have to sort of prioritize, I think sometimes we forget, because they are so skilled as athletes, we have a different expectation of them as human beings.
Yeah, I think just to finish off Mona's quote that she wrote on Facebook, she also said, "There's no doubt in my mind that the well-being of these children has not been at the center of decision making by those responsible for their personal or athletic development. Their mental and physical well-being is being sacrificed by those who should have protected them. We have to do better." And she's absolutely right. We have to do better. I'll just pause while Leah answers her phone now.
Sorry.
So you were interrupted by a train in the first
episode.
episode.
I'm the fucking worst. I thought maybe since I was going to be in my office, like, I don't know who's calling me. Leave me alone.
You're listening to 80% Mental with Dr. Chelsea Day and Dr. Leah Washington, and we're just talking about the Winter Olympics and all the stuff that happened, really. What else?
Can I take one step back
and
talk about figure skating for a hot second?
Yeah.
Because I do want to address one other thing that we do not talk about in terms of when we talked about the Court of Arbitration for Sport versus WADA versus the IOC. So WADA was begun at the behest of the IOC because they wanted to have a separate entity, right? Which makes total sense. However, there's 105 members in the IOC. The executive committee for WADA has 12 members, and the Court of Arbitration for Sport, I think, has 21. Of the 21 members of the Court of Arbitration for Sport, 3 of them concurrently sit on the IOC. And of the 12 members of the executive committee on WADA, 5 of them are concurrently sitting on the IOC. So you cannot tell me that these are independent actors when there are so much overlap. And I get that it's a small community in terms of like governance and elite sport, and like there's going to be overlap, but maybe you shouldn't be sitting on all of them at the same time. Like I don't know how you can be objective, and I don't know how you can have any credibility when you have people who are advocating for both organizations. That's a huge problem in the system. I mean, I think it's just it's further evidence of, you know, the whole, that it's the system is part of the issue, that it's not just on the individual skaters level, it's not just on the individual gymnast level, it's not even just on the individual coaches level, that you have to really look at, you know, who is making these decisions and who, you know, when we talk about like the adults in charge, like when we're talking about the coaches and we're talking about the staff and we're talking about the organizations in charge of whether it's the USOC, the IOC, RUSADA, or whoever, that, you know, I can imagine that it would be really hard to be objective if I am both on the Court of Arbitration of Sport and on the IOC. And there are too many conflicts of interest to have a lot of credibility. And I should also say that if anybody really wants to have like a full-blown rundown of just sort of the whole figure skating mess and Tuprizzi and her long history, there's a podcast called Burn It All Down, and they did a great episode, sort of like illustrating just how far back her in all of the gymnasts, skaters that have been impacted by this coach. So I would recommend listening to that episode as well.
Okay, well, we'll throw a link to that in the description for this episode. So if you're interested, you can find that on the website 80percentmental.com. But what do you think? What do you think about the whole Kamila Valieva situation? Leave us a message, you can comment on the website, or you can tweet us at EPM Podcast, or you can follow us on Instagram at 80percentmental. I'm here with Dr. Chelsea Day and Dr. Leah Washington for the super special Winter Olympics review, or whatever it was that I called it. I can't even remember. Okay, so what else? What are the big stories are there? What else can we talk about?
So you want to talk about Michaela Schifrin?
Let's do that.
Well, I like I say, I sort of missed that story, so you'll have to fill me in on what happened with that one.
So Michaela was one of the huge favorites to win a whole bunch of medals. She competed in 6 events. She didn't medal in any of them. In the prior 4 years of her career, she had 3 DNFs, did not finish. And then she had 3 in 11 days in Beijing. And so again, this is like Simone Biles 2.0 of, she missed a gate in a slalom event, which is supposed to be her specialty, and everybody freaks out and they're like, oh my God. And even her, she was like, you know, I was so confident in my skiing. Now I'm questioning everything. You know, she said, my entire career has taught me to trust in my skiing if it's good skiing, and that's all I have to rely on. Of course, the pressure is high, but that didn't feel like the biggest issue today. So it's not the end of the world, and it's so stupid to care this much, but I feel like I have to question a lot now. And so she's saying that the pressure isn't the thing that got to her, but that she missed a gate, and she's never really done that before. And now like it throws everything into question for her. And she calls it, you know, that she doesn't really understand what's going on. She doesn't have any explanation. And even when you watched her in her interviews, and she was like really searching for answers, she, you know, they'd be like, what happened? And she's like, I literally have no idea. And and of course, like NBC has done like zero self-reflection in all of this, right? I think it was after her third DNF, and she's just like sitting on the side of the mountain by herself, like for 20 minutes. And the camera is on her the entire time, totally ignoring all of the other people who are currently skiing. Like, we're just like staring at this poor woman sitting there, like having like the saddest moment of her life. And it was really interesting in that, one, coverage obviously hasn't changed, but also that she just didn't know how to cope and didn't know what to do and couldn't fix it.
What was really interesting for me about this, and it as a sports psychologist, I found it really upsetting. As a feminist, I found it even more upsetting. Is it was certainly the Simone Biles 2.0, but it was also the anti-Simone Biles. So when Simone Biles spoke up, stepped out and said, I'm having some difficulties, people were like, F you, we don't believe you, be tougher. When Michaela says, I have no idea, I felt good, they're like, nah, you couldn't have, you must not have, what's the problem? There must be something going on. And it came back to this idea that like we never believe women and we need an answer, and the ones they provide aren't good enough. And, I think that we like answers, and certainly, we have these cognitive shortcuts and we need answers and we need to package things up in boxes. And even I would love to know, what was going on. And it's not, we want an easy answer. Oh, well, she was nervous. Or, I read things that were like, but her dad died 2 years ago. She said she was still kind of grieving. Maybe it's that. And it's like, well, maybe we don't have to like have, this is the answer. And I think we all did it.
Have that right now.
We don't have to have it right now. Right.
Let people process information.
Right. And like, I don't even need that. Like, how will my life change if I have the answer? She needs the answer. Hopefully, she needs some way for closure. And hopefully she has great professionals or good friends or mentors helping her do that. But I think that's what was really frustrating to me, even as I was reviewing some of the writings today, like in preparation for this, is like, I just kind of felt like, are we ever going to fucking believe women and just like let them have their story be their story? Or it's not mental health when you say it is. When you say that it's maybe not, then it must be, and you must be lying. And so I think that was the tragedy of, that sucked. She was embarrassed and she handled it with so much more grace than anyone I know ever would have, certainly including myself. And so, we didn't give her enough props for that either, of like, you're a freaking rock star. You just had probably the most embarrassing televised 11 days of your life, and you were a star. You took 20 minutes and you sat there and you got yourself whatever you needed to do. You did it. Even while we had a camera on you, even while you came down the mountain, we're like, hey, can you explain that? I just think that, she deserves like all of the credit and all of the pats on the backs and hurrahs and all of that. And we believe you. We believe you.
100%. And the fact that she kept showing up.
Yes.
And she wasn't even supposed to ski in the team event. And they put her in at the last minute, and she kept trying, and she didn't go away, and she could have, and people would have been like, oh, well, I can understand why. And, she even at the end, she even said, like, you can fail and not be a failure. You can lose and not be a loser. Some days you lose, some days you win. And, that she's like, it didn't work out for me this time. It doesn't mean I'm a terrible skier. It doesn't mean I'm a bad person. And, and she's like, I've been skiing for 12 years. Like, I'm going 80 miles an hour down a mountain. Like, you think like that's like gonna work out every single time? Like,
Yeah.
but I think she even said, I come back because those first 9 turns today were spectacular. Really heaven. That's where I'm meant to be. And I'm stubborn as shit. And I was like, fuck yeah, girl. Like, yes. Like, keep going.
Yeah, it's funny. There's a couple of things that you mentioned there, Chelsea. You talked about the fact that she was kind of really graceful with the press and took her time and did what she wanted to. And you know for a fact that if she'd come down and she'd been really pissed off, she would have been, crucified for that. If she'd been really upset, she would have been crucified for that. And there's this whole double standard around how we treat men and women in terms of their responses. The other thing, Leah, you mentioned there about the fact that she's been skiing for like 12 years and like she's at this amazing level of success. And, I've been watching one of the 30 for 30 documentaries on Buffalo Bills recently, and I watched those Super Bowls. I remember as a kid staying up late and watching the Super Bowl every year, and they lost 4 Super Bowls in a row.
In a row, man.
But they got to 4 Super Bowls in a row,
right?
And that's just such an incredible achievement. But they'll always be remembered as this team that lost 4 Super Bowls in a row. But what it reminds me of is just this idea that what we really need is just a fundamental reimagining of what success actually is and what success actually means. And that's why I loved what we talked about earlier, just the celebration of just competing that we saw with a lot of the sports there. But yeah, just thinking about what success actually is and longevity, and keep it, like you mentioned, kept on coming back, kept on showing up. Like that's awesome. Like, why aren't we celebrating that rather than, trying to get sound bites and stories about mental health?
I wonder. I think that's. I mean, Pete, I think that's a really profound point. And I think that we've talked over the last 5 years or so more candidly about the mental health of Olympians when they get back from the Olympics and how poor it tends to be. And I can't help but wonder, like, if that's a culture shift that would change that, right? When we try to think like, what are the solutions? How do we fix that? How do we avoid that? That if we reimagine success and celebrating what that means, that not having our Olympians not return with such a hard crash and letdown because we have defined what success is, that the joy of being there, the joy of performing, the fun, the success of being this good at what you do, period, full stop. I mean, I can't help but wonder if that in and of itself, that cultural shift would change these mental health crashes that we see post-Olympics, because instead of go there, achieve, win gold, and then come back and nothing matters anymore. If we were able to still bask because that success continues when you return back from the games because it's a bigger thing, I can't help but wonder if that's one of the major fundamental shifts we need in sport.
It really kind of reminds me of Dan Jansen, the speed skater, who was at the top of his game for so long, and just every time he showed up at the Olympics, he would crash out. And it wasn't until I think his 4th Olympics that he A, finished a race, and B, won a gold medal in 1994. And it's like the perseverance to stick with it, and especially with the Winter Olympics, I think a lot, because this is the only time nobody's out there watching World Cups. Nobody's out there watching, European championships. They only watch winter sports in the Winter Olympics, especially in the United States. And so when all you see is Dan Jansen showing up every single year and not finishing and failing, that's what you think of speed skating, and that's what you think of this athlete. And not to mention the fact that he's like a world champion, like multiple years. And, for him, because that's the most visibility you're going to get as a Winter Olympian. Nobody's out here watching, other than myself, watching bobsleigh world championships, every year, or the curling North American finals or whatever, so because I do. I'm the only person I know who does that. But to have that as your visible moment is really, really hard. And to continue to show up year after year after year, I think says so much about these athletes, that this is the thing that they're meant to be. This is the thing that they want to do. And this is the thing that they can't not do.
it's an interesting point, because you mentioned this idea of this post-Olympic come down, which is a real thing. The research is out there that says this is a real thing, and it's going to either be like a bad experience and messing up with the sort of one opportunity, or one. I was going to slip in Eminem then.
Your one shot.
Yeah, the one shot. But either kind of messing up this sort of once in a career opportunity, or it can be the euphoria of actually winning and being really successful, and then coming home and that just sort of dissipating away. There's numerous examples of athletes with sort of mental health struggles after the Olympics, as you mentioned. And I guess apart from the whole sort of structural change around what success actually means and how we define it, and how sports organizations define that as well, because I know obviously funding is based on medal success a lot of the time, and medals are based, decided on fractions of seconds and tiniest margins of errors. So, what can we do you think, to maybe alleviate some of that? Other than the kind of wholesale structural stuff, like what can we do to maybe alleviate some of that, the post-Olympic come down in the first place?
I wish that I knew that answer. I've been actively working on this since the Summer Olympics with our Olympians at Ohio State, trying to figure out both in the moment and also thinking about planning for future classes of Olympians. But I think one thing I've really grappled with is there is an incredibly hair thin fine line between the need to be solely focused on your sport to get to that level and having more expansive concepts of your identity. That if your identity is too expansive, you're not going to get there. But if it's not expansive enough, that is where my whole sense of self is wrapped up in this one thing, whether I'm successful or not. Again, whether it's that euphoria come down or the disappointment. And I think that is so hard to navigate. And I think that, again, and then we move to structural things. The structure is never going to support it, because you do not want to risk them tipping over to the wrong side of that line. And, I think that's where we do a lot of that retrospective work, or where I've done a lot of that retrospective work in the last year is working on that with our athletes. And it's just so hard to do after the fact, but we have to acknowledge that you kind of have to do that if you want to get to that level. And so some of it seems like a necessary sacrifice. And I have become more skeptical about whether it is 100% fully doable to prevent that, or whether we need to just know what's going to happen and really, really focus on the safety net and the services after the fact. Because I think that just for many people might be the case.
Yeah, I think part of it is watching Shaun White have his moment in the Olympics and really talk about what's next, because of course that's what all the interviews are about. So what's next? What are you doing? What's happening? And the fact, he's lucky he had an answer. That he has this new company, White Space, that is gonna sponsor snowboarders, and that he has a project lined up, I think is crucially important. I think of athletes like Mitch Marner, who plays for the Toronto Maple Leafs, has an esports company, an esports team, a Fortnite team, or similarly, Zach Hyman, who plays for the Edmonton Oilers, also has an esports team. He's also a children's author. They have these, like Chelsea was saying, when you have your identity has multiple facets, that is a thing that is good. That's what's going to carry you through. And it is such a difficult balancing act of how much of your life can you dedicate to being elite, which is necessary if that's what you want to do. But it really it cannot be the only thing in your life. And, I also think about, Shaun White was kind of able, he didn't podium, but he was kind of able he had a good run. He came in fourth. And so it wasn't a disaster for him, and then I think of these figure skaters who they're leaving their sport and it's devastating. And, to have that experience, and then there's all of the what ifs of why did I spend all my life doing that if it was so terrible to me? And, it's so important we talk about all the time having a holistic view of athletes, and we're not really great at doing that. But no. I think that's the biggest answer.
I think the age piece comes in here too. Shaun White is wise and experienced in life. He's certainly not old. I will not call him old. But there is.
You better not call him old.
Won't do it. I don't want to say a luxury to that, but a luxury to that. I think that my population struggles so much because they're still 18 to 22-year-olds and they're having to go back into the college world. And what? I was just at the Olympics and I have to go to class and go to regular practice. And then, good God, 15-year-olds, holy shit, what? And so I think that when we talk about that age continuum, like we did before, that's a huge factor as well, that it's a lot to ask of a 15 or even 20-year-old to be thinking about that stuff. It's a lot easier sell for someone who is young, but more well-versed in life. It's a little easier to have had the opportunity and have the supports in place to be able to do that.
Yeah, I think a lot about, and sorry to bring up for my Ohio State friend, I'm sorry to bring up the University of Michigan. However,
I'm a fan of whoever pays my mortgage.
Fair. It's valid. But, the University of Michigan men's hockey team had 4 Olympians, that on their team, out of their program. And that is a lot of athletes all on one team. And to have to adjust back to, like you said, going to class, not being going back to other very successful athletes can be a challenge. And I think part of also, I think of gymnasts who, are able to have collegiate careers after Olympic careers can be really helpful. I've been watching, there's so many Olympians competing right now, like Sunisa Lee and Grace McCallum and, Jordan Childs, they're having most of them are having really successful collegiate careers, but it is a real shift in the type of competition that it is and what they focus on. But at least they have that sort of they can still be in their sport. And I think for a lot of these sports where this is it, there aren't programs out there, there aren't professional leagues out there, there aren't, there isn't the next thing. The next thing is you got to come up with something.
Christopher Henriksen and Rob Schinke and a bunch of other people wrote a consensus statement on mental health in 2020. And they talked about exactly the themes that you guys are both talking about here. The games and mental health are interrelated because athletes commit wholeheartedly to their Olympic and Paralympic pursuits, so that they're at an increased risk of disappointment and what we call identity foreclosure, which is exactly what you're talking about. The idea that if your identity is tied up in one thing and then that one thing comes to an end, then your whole identity is kind of, well, who the hell am I? But what they said, which was interesting, was that the post-games period is really quite vulnerable because it's not just the athletes who are exhausted, the staff, the coaching staff, the psychologists, all of the support staff are also exhausted and sometimes just unavailable. So that proactive work then becomes really important. Just to kind of briefly mention another study here by Holly Bradshaw and colleagues. It was a qualitative study with some British Olympians, so just only a handful of athletes, but they talked about wanting to be talked to by former Olympians rather than sports psychologists, and just having that perspective really of kind of well, what's it like? What do I do? And sort of having those almost that role modeling, I guess. There's a way of alleviating some of these issues.
We had a really cool opportunity at Ohio State after the Summer Olympics. One of our swim coaches is married to a French synchro Olympian, and she's just this incredible human being. And so when we hosted our first post-Olympic group for our 11 summer athletes, I asked her if she'd come with me. And she doesn't have mental health training. She is interested in maybe doing some different coaching and stuff like that. And I said, I just think you offer more than I do. I offer a really interesting lens and I can sit back and jump in if I need to. But, you've been there, and recently enough. And to watch them interact with her was really profound, because she has moved far past the Olympics, and, is married and has a kid, and has really been engaging in non-sport life for a long time. And I really do think that's an underappreciated thing. And I think sometimes as sports psychology professionals, we get really threatened by that. But what does this person without training have to offer that I don't? And in fact, quite a lot. And I thought we made a great duo where I could jump in to talk about some of the more clinical aspects, but to watch them just relate and connect in a way that I can't fathom as a very mediocre mid-major diver, was just really cool. And I think that had either one of us not been there, the tone of that conversation would have been so much less impactful. And it really gave me an appreciation for exactly what you're talking about, Pete, that like, we've got to embrace this holistic approach in our own roles and not being threatened by that as we try to figure out how to manage these issues, that there's room for us all. And in fact, I think we're all necessary at the table if we're going to change, whether we're talking about the culture of 15-year-old figure skaters from an Olympic committee perspective, or whether we're talking about, boots on the ground when they come home and dealing with mental health is, the conflict of interest stuff. We have to have such a greater breadth and depth of people available, and working together in those spaces if we're going to even do more than just be talking heads that lament and complain about these issues, which is one of my favorite pastimes. But if we're going to move into, fixing anything, I think.
I'm here with Dr. Leah Washington and Dr. Chelsea Day for the super special, great smashing, super special, super smashing, great Winter Olympics review. And we've been talking about the post-Olympic come down. We've been talking about Kamila Valieva and some of our favorite Olympic moments as well. I want to sort of shift gears a little bit and talk about success stories and achievement, and particularly, I guess, thinking about any mental greatness that we've seen on display during these Olympics, or kind of use of mental skills that was kind of obvious. What are our thoughts on that? Leah, I'll come to you first on that one.
I got a couple.
I thought you might.
So one in particular, Niels van der Poel, 5,000 meter speed skating. So he was the favorite going in. He was the world record holder. He'd won every distance he'd ever entered. And so he is in the final pair to skate. And he kind of starts out like super cash, like skating, not a real fast start. He's at the first split, he was 1.42 seconds behind in 13th place. And I was like, sir, I don't know what you're doing. You're not very fast. He most, for the most part, like he kept moving up placements at each split, but with 3 laps to go, he was 2 seconds behind first place, which is a fucking lifetime in speed skating. And so 3 laps to go, he's 2.04 seconds ahead or behind the leader. 2 laps to go, now he's 1.7 seconds behind. 1 lap to go, he's a full second behind. He's in second place, but he's a full second behind the leader. And you can just watch him decide to race this race. And like at 3 seconds, and he just like drops the hammer and is like, and takes off. And like,
wow.
And I'm again 2 feet from my television, screaming like, buddy, you gotta go. Like at some point, like you have to start skating. And it was just like, all of a sudden he was like, oh, right. Like I'm currently in the Olympics. I should probably win this thing, and just blows it away and skates to an Olympic record. Like and wins by like almost a half a second. And it was like just wild to watch him like shave seconds off of his time. Truly an impressive like race. The other one that I really would like to highlight is the Czech Republic women's hockey team. And their goalie specifically. This was the first time that they had qualified for the Olympics. Part of this is because they had expanded the field from 8 to 10, and I think they're going to expand it again from 10 to 12 so they can match the men's side, which will be great. But they finally had a coach who had had a lot of experience in women's hockey, had a lot of NHL experience, a lot of WHL experience, the Western Hockey League in Canada. But one of the things that they talked about, that when they were setting goals for going to the Olympics, they said, we know how it feels to lose. That's not going to surprise us. But they've set 15 different goals in qualifying tournaments. And not a single one of them was to qualify for the Olympics. It was all about what kind of hockey they wanted to play, how they didn't want to have any regrets, how they wanted to inspire women in the Czech Republic, how they wanted to have spectators at their games. And one of their top players even said this quote that I love so much: we want to continue with these goals because when we focus too much on the results, we get tied down and get nervous. Of course, we'd like to get a medal in the games, but my personal goal and our team's goals will be to do our best every day, focus on the process, and have fun. The Olympics are new for us, so every game will be the game. I think we can get a medal. We have a very strong team. It may seem contradictory, but I think we will win a medal if we don't focus on it. And I was like, yes, 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 yes. It's all of it. It's everything. It's everything that we want.
It's a dream.
I was like reading this article and I was like, oh my God, this is so perfect. And, they beat Sweden. They beat China. They lost to Japan in qualifying in Group B. And they ended up losing to the United States in quarterfinals. But they only lost 4-1, which in normal hockey would be like, that's kind of a lot. But when you look at the shots on goal, the Czech Republic had 6 shots on goal. And they still scored 1 goal, which is pretty high percentage. The United States had 59 shots on goal. We should have won that game 15-0. Like 59 shots on goal is bananas. So for Klara Peslarova, who is their goalie, like to only let 4 through, like that, she's a fucking brick wall as far as I'm concerned. Like unbelievable performance. They should have been destroyed in that game. And to hold the United States to 4 goals was a huge accomplishment. And I'm so proud of these women. And I'm always excited when people are in the Olympics for the first time. But, to get out of group play and to face, the United States team in your quarterfinals and to not collapse, I think is amazing.
Psychologist's dream.
Truly.
The whole setting plan that you just read out there.
Right. I feel like I need you to send me that specific article and I need to forward it to every coach I work with and be like, they made the Olympics, so you should listen to me more.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's my new favorite
Chelsea,
story.
What about you?
That's my new favorite. I don't know. Does it beat that? Like that's like the things that I dream of in my, before I go to work. I don't know. I'm gonna be, I think, probably really cliche, but like this speed skating, Aaron Jackson, for someone who picked up speed skating freaking 5 years ago, like that's terrifying. Like it's not like you don't just skate like in your day-to-day life. So the fact that you can like put on skates and then just like become a freaking phenom and like almost not be there and then just freaking gold, like let's take away every other component of that story. And oh my God, like it was so cool. Leah, that's one that I watched. I just watched that over and over.
Her face. Oh, it was just like joy, like radiated. She looked like the sun. Like
it was like I don't know if I've really ever watched like speed skating with excitement. Like I feel weird saying that in front of you, but Like I've watched it. It's fine. It kind of makes me anxious because I just worry about the whole like sliding and breaking bones and slicing with like sharp things. And it makes me very nervous. But that is like, I watched it over and over and over, and each time felt like just so full of excitement. And again, I think it's just this idea that like the idea of the newness and doing things in theory maybe healthy in the right way and maturity and grit and like I don't know, I just felt so excited by that. And I don't know what the mental skills were that went into that, but I bet they were pretty good. And like I just felt real fired up by that. I would get so excited and come up again like a different Instagram account on my feed. I'd be like, yeah, yes, I'm excited again. I think that was probably my favorite, my real favorite like moment. Where I felt the most joy, because that's what it's all about, how much joy I feel.
Yeah, and she learned to skate, what was it, 4 months before qualifying for 2018, right? Is that right? I mean, who does that?
Yes. Like what?
And I think about stories like this all the time of like, what athletes are we missing out on? Like
so many.
You know, like what would have happened if Michael Phelps' sister wasn't on a swim team and he wasn't just at the pool? Or, you know, how many, you know, I was watching curling and they were talking about the Swedish woman and how she went to like the Swedish curling academy for school when she was 13. And I was like, what? You know, we don't value winter sports in particular in the United States the same way they do in other countries. And I think we are really missing out. And I like look at a lot of the bobsleigh athletes that we have, where it's they all come to bobsleigh after doing a different sport. And if we had captured these athletes earlier, like how much more successful, you know, could we be as a country in terms of like, you know, it's always like, well, I couldn't play football anymore. I couldn't play rugby anymore. Or, you know, Lolo Jones, I couldn't be a track athlete anymore. I mean, because all for bobsleigh, you just need to be powerful. Like, can you push a heavy thing? Perfect. We love it. Like, that's what we want. But, you know, and to look at, or, you know, another amazing moment, Alana Myers Taylor, of becoming the most decorated bobsleigh athlete, you know, female athlete out there. And, you know, to watch her progress from Olympic to Olympics to Olympics, where she started out as a pusher, moved up to brakeman, moved up to pilot, and just, you know, and she came to bobsleigh after being a softball player, you know, and she was actually at George Washington when I was at George Washington. She was finishing up her degree while I was there. And she is truly one of the most focused and positive people that you could ever meet and run into. And just like if she sets her mind to something, like that's a guarantee thing that's going to happen. And to watch her stick with this sport over time and progress to such a degree it's so fun to watch her be successful, you know, over her career.
Yeah, I kind of think about it the other way. You know, you talk about athletes that we've missed out on through them just not having that opportunity. I think that I must be naturally incredibly talented at something, and I just don't know what that thing is. I just
tried it yet?
Yeah, haven't had the opportunity. But yeah, we you know, you mentioned Aaron Jackson there, and we talked about Deborah Thomas earlier, the first black athlete to medal at the Winter Olympics back in 1988, not 98.
Thank you.
But you know, it is fair to say that the Winter Olympics is a pretty white affair.
Yes,
not just the snow. My own personal theory, and I wrote this on Twitter the other day. My own personal theory is that there's enough shit trying to kill black people. We don't need to be throwing ourselves down a mountain at 80 miles an hour head first on a baking tray. We don't need to be doing stuff like that. But we have seen something a bit different though in this Olympics. We've seen more black athletes competing, and we've seen more black athletes enjoying success. And I don't know. I mean, I wonder what's happening there. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on this?
I mean, have you met America? I mean, I know that we're talking internationally, but like, obviously I have a very specific view of where I live. And when you think about the accessibility of a lot of the sports that are in the Winter Olympics and the socioeconomic inequality in our country in particular, and I believe there as well, I think that just the accessibility piece and that, there is incentive to keep people of lower SES out of these sports so that those in areas of privilege can continue to benefit from the privilege of opportunity for Olympics, for this type of fame and glory. And so it behooves those who do have access to maintain the status quo so that they can maintain that space, that status, that privilege. And so, I can't help but think that maybe it means like a rice grain of progress, right? Of are we making things? Is someone making things more accessible? Are we starting to see opportunity grow? Is some of it the visibility, the increasing visibility? Maybe it is the only time that we watch these sports, but is that visibility, that social media access, all of these other ways we can consume this, making it more accessible? But I mean, I think it's at least here, I can't help but chalk it up to, the inequalities in our country and the benefits you get from maintaining those inequalities in this space in particular.
Leah, do you have any thoughts? We are starting to see some change here. We are starting to see kind of more success and more Black athletes at the Winter Olympics. What's behind that?
I mean, I think a lot does have to be said for the athletes who, it sounds really cliche that representation matters, but representation really matters. And so when you have like success begets success. And so when you have people like Alana Myers-Taylor and you have people like, Shawnee Davis, who competed in speed skating for a long time, or, that to have these, it's really important to be the first, and it's really important to not be the only, right? That so many of these athletes give back to their communities and, in bringing people forward. And I think part of it is that access, where a lot of the winter sports are really expensive. Like you can't just like pick up a bobsleigh like at Dick's Sporting Goods. Like skates are expensive.
Yourself. Got one in the backyard. Come on over.
I'm there. That the more athletes we have competing at the collegiate level and the more athletes that we have, when you look at when the United States played Canada in the gold medal hockey final in the women's, every single woman on both teams had played NCAA hockey. And you can't get that without that kind of systematic support, in that you don't have, that you have to have the people who are willing to break the ceiling, but then to pull everybody else behind you. And I think that is probably the biggest strength. And unfortunately, the added pressure of being an athlete of color, that you have this placed on you of like, okay, well now you have to be the example of what Black athletes are in the Winter Olympics. And it's it's a huge burden to bear. And I think we have been really, really lucky in the athletes that have been able to achieve that and to be successful and then to come back and say, no, come with me.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point. It's important to be the first, but it's also important to not be the only. Such an important point. And a shout out as well to Montel Douglas, who was the first woman to represent Team GB at both the Summer and Winter Olympics. Pretty impressive. She competed in the bobsleigh.
That's amazing.
14
Truly.
years after she went to Beijing as a sprinter.
Nice.
She finished 17th in the bobsleigh, but in fairness, that's better than most people on the planet could do.
Yeah.
So, and she's also...
One of them is in the Olympics and the rest of them are not.
Exactly, right. And I didn't know this, but she's still the third fastest Brit over 100 meters.
Amazing.
Wow.
Still holds that record, which is pretty awesome.
I would like to talk about, for a hot second, Ryan Cochran-Siegel's silver medal in the men's Super G. He's the only U.S. athlete to medal in alpine skiing. And one of the reasons why I want to bring him up is 1 year ago, last January, he was skiing in a race in Austria in Kitzbühel, which is a really tough course. It's very fast. It's very steep. He crashed and had, what did he call it? I was lucky to walk away with nothing more than a minor broken neck.
What?
That was his direct quote.
Lucky? Broken neck don't go together?
Yeah, I'm more impressed with the minor broken neck.
Right. A minor broken neck. A year ago.
Wow.
And he got a silver medal in the Olympics this year. Almost 50 years to the day that his mom won an Olympic gold medal in the slalom. She competed in 1972 in Sapporo in Japan. He wasn't supposed to win anything really. Like he's obviously a world-class skier and was really having an incredible season when he crashed. But he didn't have like the best training runs, in this Olympics. And so having a silver medal was like a humongous accomplishment. I was actually watching the World Cup skiing a couple weeks ago that was at Kitzbühel. And they were talking about his crash, and it's weird because obviously he's going down the hill at 1,000 miles an hour and he crashes and he like takes out all of the netting, and he's like sitting on the side of the mountain. He's taking his helmet off, but then you can kind of see like, he's like pointing to his neck. He's like, yeah. And I was like, oh no. And they airlifted him off the mountain, which is also wild. But I think, to have such a significant injury and then to come back a year later and win a silver medal is a true feat. And I think most of the Winter Olympics, right, is like who can fall down a mountain fast enough or with like the most style. It's like every sport. And, you watch like, I'm thinking ahead to like the Paralympics and watching like these visually impaired skiers. And I'm like, I can't go down a mountain with like both my eyes. Like what? It's amazing. And, and so I think to watch him come back and to be able to ski at such a high level only a year later is really amazing.
Well, in fairness, it was only a minor broken neck, so
right. Truly, that was his quote on his Instagram post. Lucky to walk away with nothing more than a minor broken neck, already hoping for my third attempt at conquering this beast of a course next year.
Wow.
Like, and he's like in a neck brace, like at the same. And I'm like, sure.
I suppose we should also probably mention Eileen Gu as well at 18. Mm-hmm. Medaling, three medals, gold in the half pipe in the big air and slope style silver. Impressive stuff. 18
Incredible skiing. Incredible skiing.
What kind of interested me about that story as well, and I don't know whether I'll leave this in this episode or not, was obviously she's decided to compete for China. Mm-hmm. So mother is Chinese, father is American. She grew up with a mother. Chinese culture is very big to her. And I don't know how many people sort of were aware of this or noticed this in the press, the whole kind of narrative around her deciding to compete for China. Why would she do that? Why would she possibly want to compete for China? Like as if it was this like absolute impossibility that she would want to, like she's half Chinese, her mother's Chinese, like, she's grown up around that culture. Like, why is that such a difficult thing for people to grasp that she would want to do that? And it just kind of speaks again to this whole Western white superiority.
I think people do not realize the number of athletes in America who compete for other countries.
Yes, absolutely. Well, because patriotism and worse, right? That how could you not want to compete for America? But I think people can't fathom with the amount of perceived energy that we think we put into supporting our Olympians, right? I think Americans think we back our Olympians really well. I think that Americans think that we are like champions for our Olympians because we tune in and we throw parties, right? Like, I really think that we think that, and we don't do that at all. But if that is true, how could you not want to compete for America? We've got your back. This is great, versus the idea that, again, it's maybe not what's best for the athlete in like 90 ways, but I do think it comes back to this. I'm just going to say nationalism. I'll just leap to nationalism. I think it's a nationalism issue, right? That how can you not want to represent this great country because this is all that there is and everything else, isn't. And it's, again, but we make it about us. I think that's part of the biggest issue with spectatorship, period. We make their performances about us instead of appreciating the prowess and the work and the skill that the athletes have. It becomes totally about us.
Well, and I think it's really, really interesting to compare the amount of press and attention that Eileen Gu has gotten for wanting to compete for China versus Gus Kenworthy, who is competing for Britain. And he's already competed in multiple Olympics for the United States, but his mother's British, and he wanted to honor her, and no one has said anything about it. And so I think there is this, it's one thing to compete for Britain, and it's a wholly other thing to compete for China.
Yeah.
Can't imagine why. Yeah. I can't spot a difference.
No, I mean, I couldn't even begin to think what that might be. But speaking of Gus Kenworthy, I don't know if you saw him fall fully on his ass in the half pipe. Like, I don't know how he got up from that because that looked like it. That looked like it.
That was rough.
Yeah, just a minor broken ass.
Oh God, I'm such a baby. There's no way. If I broke a pinky, I'd be like, nope, I'm retired. It's been nice. I broke my pinky and it's swollen. I'm going home. Put me on a plane, please. Mm-mm.
So this is our super smashing great Winter Olympics review episode. And I'm here with Dr. Leah Washington and Dr. Chelsea Day. And we've talked about the Winter Olympics and all Winter Olympics stuff. You can go back and listen to it. I don't know why you'd be starting to listen now, like an hour and a half in. But if you are, then go back and listen to the rest of it. I don't know what I'm talking about at this point. It's late. Okay, so last thing we're going to talk about then. Coolest Olympic sports, Winter Olympic sports. Let's start with that. What's the coolest sport in the Winter Olympics?
Slopestyle snowboard. Just, you can't not be super cool and be a slopestyle snowboarder. Like, they all look awesome. They're totally chill. They're all friends. Like, they're doing rad tricks off of the pipes. They're throwing unbelievable, like, sick ass tricks off of these hills. And they just like land and they're like, yo, what's up? And I'm like, yeah, I want to hang out with you guys. Like, and the wild thing is, like, every story of every athlete is either this kid just got his driver's license or this kid had to miss Pyeongchang because he was in a coma. And you're like,
a minor coma.
When did a punctured lung stop anyone? Like, they just seem like such chill, like, cool people to hang out with. Like, yeah. I want to go be with them. I want to have a beer. I want to, like, kick back. I want, like,
can't have beer. They're 14. They just got the driver's license.
Well, it's fine.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to look past that because that is pretty cool. But I actually quite like the skiing, the slopestyle skiing, and the snow cross as well.
Yeah,
because it's just like a fight at 80 miles an hour. It's awesome. Chelsea, what about you? What's the coolest Winter Olympic sport?
All of them where you fly off of a big hill and do a bunch of flips and land, all of the varieties of that. Like, as a former diver, I feel like I jumped on a diving board and then I landed in water and then I like floated to the side and like climbed out the stairs. And certainly, if you land wrong off of any diving board, it can be like hitting cement, but it's not actual cement. It's like not actual firm ground. It just feels like it. So I am just in awe because I also can't wrap my head around like how you learn it, how you train for it. Like I've watched the training of like into the squishy stuff. And it just blows my mind that like you're willing to just fling it and then do these things that I did like a fraction of off a diving board, but then like you land on your feet and then you just take your skis off or your snowboard off and then you just walk over and have an interview. And I can't wrap my head around it. Like a lot of the rest of the stuff, like I can at least fathom what some of that might be like, maybe. I'm just in awe every time. I think it's magical. It's entrancing. And so anything where you fly in the air and do the flips, whether we're talking half pipe or off any of the jumps, like all of that is incredible.
Yeah, it was like I said before, like every single time, the fraction of a second before they land, they're just thinking they're not going to make that.
They're
and
dead.
Then they'll just like whip their legs around and just like land and be like, yeah.
Oh, they're about to die. Oh, I guess they're fine.
Okay, what's the silliest sport in the Winter Olympics? Because let's face it, right? I mean, okay, all sport is ridiculous when you break it down to its component parts. Okay,
100%.
Right, but what silliest sport in the Winter Olympics? Because there's some silly ones.
My first thought was short track speed skating, especially the relay, because it's just chaos.
Yeah.
What is happening? Who thought this was a good idea? Like, Chelsea, you were talking about like people wiping out skate blades,
heart rate,
nightmare scenario. I also think this is probably not going to sound great, but like ice dancing, when they have chosen rhythm dance as their rhythm of choice. And they're dancing with a street style music. And it's a whole lot of very, very white people making some real interesting choices. I cannot get behind Canada's orange sherbet colored costume. It was a real aggressive orange. And it hurt me.
Fair enough. Chelsea, what's the silliest sport in the?
I feel like this. I feel like this might be a hot take, but the biathlon. Okay, so like what I picture in my mind is because like if you watch it, like it takes a while, and like it can be like I would say like a little more on the boring side for myself. But I picture like in their head, like, like gotta get to gotta get my gun around. Like it just feels like really random. Like it feels very old. Do you know what I mean? Like, yeah, like a million years ago, like when you had to like race, I don't know, for food or something. I don't really know, but this is what happens in my head. And I just picture like, it's 2022 and like you can just order food on DoorDash. And so like I don't need to like ski through the woods and beat the guy to like kill the fox to eat for dinner. I just can't.
They're not shooting elk.
Well, they aren't. But isn't that where it had to come from? Like they're just, I don't know, like I just picture like backwoods Ohio and like people training and like they put up the dad went and like put the targets up throughout the woods and like they're across from the deer stands so that, when they deer hunt, it can be some of the same areas. And so for me, it's just kind of silly in like 2022 as I know like there's the historic and the spirit of the games, but that's why it's my silliest because I just get in this whole like, what are we doing? Like, okay, no, this is practical.
That's how they train. That's why the Norwegians are so successful because they come over to Ohio and train
to deer hunt. And
yeah,
that's what I figured. I see them ever. I always wonder, they have the big Norwegian flags in the back of their snowsuit. And I could never figure out, who they were or why they were here.
I can't believe that neither of you have mentioned the luge, which is the stupidest thing I've ever seen in my life, only topped by the double luge, which is ridiculous.
It's ridiculous.
Really bonkers.
I mean, all Olympic sports are incredible and all the Olympic athletes are amazing, but the double dutch
Certainly.
is silly. I'm sorry. What 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 sports would you like to see improved, and how would you improve them?
There's a place here. We have a brewery in Columbus, Ohio, that has curling. And around the edges of the curling are igloos that you can sit in and eat and drink and be warm. But the curling, instead of stones, they use empty half kegs. And then they have these little tiny, those little, like, what are they, pony kegs? And they use those as the rocks. So I think that would be an interesting way to improve it in the Olympics, because it seems to work really well here at the brewery.
My vote is to add the sport of dog sledding. I think if we could have horses in the Summer Olympics, I don't see any reason why we can't have dogs in the Winter Olympics.
That is a fair point.
I think if the race was a week long, we could check in with the racers. We could have profiles of all the dogs. We want to increase viewership to the Winter Olympics, guaranteed win.
Can I tell you an interesting Olympic fact?
Please.
Dog sledding was part of the Winter Olympics at one point.
You gotta bring it back.
Bring it back.
And I can't remember, because I was looking at stuff the other day, and I can't remember whether it was just a demonstration sport for 1 year, or whether it was a full Olympic sport. But I'm sure it was only for like one Olympics, but they did have dog sledding in the Olympics, and I am fully on board with that idea. I think that would be incredible.
There's no downside to it. I think we can have. I would follow that shit constantly.
Obviously, you'd follow any new edition constantly.
I know, but this was tough.
Yeah, you would. I'd like to see. I'd like to see the slope style skiers go through rings of fire.
Ooh,
I'd like them to add
that.
That's
I think
cool.
they should have to.
You could do a whole Game of Thrones fire and ice situation with that.
Yeah,
oh.
Yeah. I think we might be done with our super smashing great amazing Winter Olympic review episode. What do you guys think?
It was the most professional episode we've recorded.
I think so.
Obviously.
So we are out of time for this episode. So it just remains for me to say a huge thank you to my guests, Dr. Leah Washington and Dr. Chelsea Day. So thank you both so much for joining me again for an episode of 80% Mental.
Always a pleasure.
We've talked about a bunch of stuff in this episode. We talked about our favorite moments of the games, and obviously spent a little bit of time talking about Kamila Valieva and Michaela Shiffrin, some of the issues around identity of Olympic athletes, and why having more of a broad identity, I suppose, is such an important thing to avoid some of that post-Olympic come down and some of the mental health issues that athletes might experience. We talked about success stories, about Black athlete success in particular. And we talked about how to improve the Olympics with dog sledding. So I hope you've enjoyed what you've heard. I always mess this bit up. We've gone for like almost 2 hours and I always mess this bit up.
Click like and subscribe. Smash that like button.
That's the one. Do you want to have a go at doing it?
Follow us on all social medias and tell your friends and pals and
smash that like button.
Smash that like button, yo.
That'll do. Listen and subscribe to all of the 80% Mental episodes.
I didn't even tell you my amazing way to fucking fix the Olympics.
Oh.
What's your amazing way to fix the Olympics?
Here's my solution to the Olympics. Have one location. All Olympics will be held at said location from here until the end of time. Summer and winter. So now you only build one Olympic venue.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to ruin cities. You don't have to have countries go into millions of dollars of debt. You don't have to displace indigenous peoples and homeless populations. So you have one location. All you have to do then is then upgrade instead of rebuild. You can use it for world championships. It's going to be in Lausanne, Switzerland, because Switzerland is a neutral country, so we can get rid of all that nationalistic bullshit. It is in the Alps and on a lake. You can have winter, you can have sailing, you can have rowing. It's also the headquarters of the IOC. And this way, you can also have smaller countries still be the host of the Olympics without having to come up with all of the infrastructure. So you could have like Thailand could host the Olympics, or like South Africa, or someone who's never going to host the Olympics because they can't build all the venues. The venues are there. We just all go to the same place. You only have one Olympic Village you have to deal with. And you still have your hosts. They can show off their culture, their art, their costuming, whatever. But we don't have to continually destroy cities. We don't have to rebuild. We don't have these buildings that never get used again.
And whose ego is that good for? Isn't this all an ego play? Nobody gets to have their ego stroked if they can't destroy their country to show off for.
Well, I'm not saying there aren't barriers to implementing this plan. I'm just saying that this plan, if implemented, will fix a lot of problems.
Sounds cool. America will never agree.
That might be the single greatest idea I've heard about anything ever.
I have been thinking about this, obviously, for the vast majority of my life.
Of course you have. Of course you
But
have.
how cool would it be to have an Olympics
Very cool.
hosted by Haiti? Like, I want to see these like tiny little countries be able to show off their cool shit that they're never going to be able to show off because they're never going to be able to host the Olympics. But if they didn't have to come up with all the capital, they didn't have to come up with all of the infrastructure because it's already there. If we want to expand participation and we want to expand people getting into the Olympics and we want to, allow, I don't know, any of the countries in the continent of Africa. Oh, no, I'm fully aware of there are some things that we'd have to work out.
It was like a couple. It sounds really cool. I would go to them.
I would too. I'm gonna do the ending bit again because I'm gonna leave that bit in because that was awesome. So, what an episode.
You're welcome. You're welcome for solving the Olympics.
Thank you. I don't know why I'm thinking you. They're not my Olympics. Well, that's pretty much all we've got time for in today's episode. So thank you so much to my guests, Dr. Chelsea Day. Thank you for coming back again onto 80% Mental.
Always a pleasure.
And Dr. Leah Washington, thank you so much for suggesting the episode in the first place.
Hey man, I'll force the Olympics onto anybody.
I hope you've enjoyed what you've listened to today. And if you have, you can listen to all the other episodes and subscribe at 80percentmental.com. Leave us a comment at EPM Podcast on Twitter or at 80% Mental on Instagram. Like, share, tell your friends, all that good social media stuff. And I will see you next time. Well, I won't see you.
We've been through this. It's a podcast.